I've come to Burkina Faso for about a week to meet with the farmers from UNPCB and who we've been trying to work with for about 6 months now, and to see what kind of infrastructure exists that could help us export a container of cotton initially for our socks and then hopefully to get involved in the supply chain.
And my interest in this is really starting from the other end of the supply chain. So I was with Ethical Apparel Africa, where we're really focused on the garment manufacturing side of the value chain and export to the US and the UK, but there we're seeing a big opportunity more than anything else, where we are starting to increase more and more of the garment production coming out of West Africa, but we're still importing all of the fabrics from China, which feels a little bit unnecessary when we have such a large supply of cotton coming out of this region.
And the great irony of that is there's 9,000 certified organic, fair trade and organic farmers that are producing a really high quality cotton that I really was, my technical people in the US were very surprised at the quality of this. And so we're stuck with them at the beginning of the chain and you're at the end of the chain and we need the middle of the chain fixed.
And I think organic is exciting both in terms of the niche and also the opportunity and momentum behind it, but also the feeling that there is a good thing happening when you promote more organic cotton in the region.
Absolutely. And what's going on with all these wonderful NGOs we work with around the world is that the business community is not involved. They're not present at the table. And so that's what we're all about, is trying to develop a relationship directly with the farmers, and Catholic Relief Services has done an incredible job in working with them, and their union's great. And so we're trying to just take their raw material and get others interested in it. We have other brands interested in it. We have a project in Detroit that's interested in it, but we're just stuck because we've got this great gin now coming online, and we've got these great farmers, and we don't have spinning that we need, the spinning that we need.
Yeah, and so it's a tricky question of how to close that value chain gap, because there is some infrastructure in the region, and I know you've been looking at it, that does do some spinning, and there are people who do weaving, and there are some operations for dyeing and finishing as well, so you can imagine it working here, and there actually was a bigger industry 20 years ago, but largely through mismanagement and just not sort of reinvesting. The industry has largely fallen into disrepair or just really focused in on the African wax print market, producing a grade of textiles and a thickness of textiles that isn't suited for export anymore.
Right. Well, and I'm wearing some of those, and I'm really impressed with the worker-owned cooperatives that are doing the weaving and the people on the ground that are committed to that thing. But what we need for export market to the US in the organic market and to the EU in the organic market is ring-spun combed cotton, and that's what the hole is in the marketplace. So the infrastructure that exists here, it's fine, it's totally workable. There's just this barrier. You don't have to start with the mega million international brands. The organic industry is perfect for this because organic cotton represents less than 1% of the cotton in the world already today. And so you have these small to medium-sized brands as well as larger brands that are playing with it. And so you could scale this operation that we need, the spinning operation for ring spinning and comb, by starting with one frame, starting with one comber. That's like $1 million investment. It's not like a huge investment.
And it's, I almost see it as complementary with a larger scale top-down effort where if you can figure it out with one facility and be successful in creating a yarn that then gets supplied in the US market as finished garments, that is a proof of concept, and that will show other brands that it can be done here and scale manufacturers as well.
So for my specific needs, some of it is cotton processed into a certain style of yarn, and it ships to the US to be knit in knitters in the US that knit all of our socks. In some instances, it's cotton that's spun into this very high quality yarn, and then it gets woven into beautiful fabrics at small scale producers, at artisan groups. It gets dyed by local standards, and it's just really artisan wear. And sometimes it's a combination of the two, where maybe it's a specific type of knitwear fabric that then gets sewn at small worker owned facilities, hopefully, small workshops.
To add to that, I wouldn't discount the opportunity for industrial scale garment manufacturing as well. And I think there are some segments where the cotton lends itself to production, and where facilities even in their history have produced to the international market. There's a facility in Ivory Coast that produced Wrangler jeans 20 years ago. We've started looking at uniform brands or workwear companies where you could make that out of the cotton. So
See, I think you could take the value. I think the world's very different now in the apparel industry than it was even 20 years ago. At least my company's 26 years old, and I've seen it change dramatically. And I think that it's still within that workwear or in that gene. It has to be a niche market.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the model has to shift in this region from a model where one person makes an entire garment to a model where it's a line system and they do one part of the garment just because it's that much more efficient. So that part of it does probably.
And I still think you could keep that niche mentality and go for a more production line facility by putting people in teams and having everyone learn all the different operations, but maybe they're a sleeve setter, but then they learn hemming and they learn everything else so that you have, again, dignity in work and variety, and you're not killing their bodies by doing the same repetitive motion for 20 years.
Yeah, and frankly, the model that exists in the facilities now is that you often have expat managers coming in from the major garment manufacturing regions that are the middle managers in the factory and really manage production. The more you can train an employee to do every piece of the garment and every specialized skill around it, the more you've trained them to potentially be able to fill that role as a supervisor, which I think really is the goal, is to root that knowledge locally.
And the more they're not just enfranchised from their final product. The product with assembly line production and apparel is that the quality suffers, and the quality suffers because all the worker sees is their hem or their sleeve set. They don't care about the rest of the garment, and that can't repeat those mistakes here. The real reason that I'm here is because I'm this small to medium-sized business and I'm being chased around the world by climate change. So I contracted exclusively in the US, and then biofuels happened and I had to move offshore. And then I went and developed an entire production chain in Central America, and we got this special variety of cotton for the Nicaraguan climate, blah, blah, blah. And we were up to 2,000 growers and everything was great and the rotations were good. And we were working with nut butter companies who bought their other products in their rotation, and then the rains didn't come and they lost 20% and 40% and 80% of their crop, and they can't even grow cotton anymore. So then I moved to Peru, and then Peru has floods and droughts. And then I go to India, and now I'm in Burkina Faso. It's like ridiculous for me as a medium-sized business to have to contract all over the world just to have my raw material. So we cannot emulate what's happened so far, and it's a catastrophe. I mean, it's a catastrophe, really.
Yeah. It's harder to do with organic because organic is harder to grow. And so you need to invest resources up front to do it properly. From what I've heard, it takes 18 months start to finish to output a batch of organic cotton. And so you almost need a brand to commit. And you can't just
It takes 3 years to even get certified, but then your yields don't get to where you need them for 4 or 5 years. And organic is an investment in the future, and it's an investment in the small-scale producers who feed the world, who feed 70% of the food we eat in the world is produced by small-scale producers, and that's what organic cotton is all about, and it needs to be about.
More and more people are going to be interested in where their garments are coming from. I don't think that's idealistic. And brands are recognizing that. And so dozens of brands have committed to all sustainable cotton by 2020 or 2025, according to Textile Exchange work. And I think more brands are also demanding organic cotton, and it's a position where there is a shortage of global supply relative to demand, and I think there are plans to grow a significant amount.
Plain and simple, a ring spinning plant located here in Burkina that could help these farmers increase their profitability, which in turn would help more farmers grow, which in turn help more best practices and farmer exchange programs so that they could combat climate change. But the conventional mill I just met with here doesn't have any work for the next month, and the organic cotton's sitting there. So, I mean, there's always going to be these gaps in production, but you got to start somewhere.
Coming out of this conference, I think what's becoming pretty clear is that there are a lot of people attacking this problem from different angles, and the more there is communication between the cotton suppliers who say, okay, we can budget this much over time, then you can structure facilities to process that efficiently. And then you pull in the government to make sure you're getting the right amount of support, whether it's electricity subsidies or
export help or whatever.
Yeah. I think an ideal outcome for me would be to have all those stakeholders align on a vision that works and that not only develops organic cotton production, but also helps more of the local value addition. And allows that to scale to a point where you're adding jobs. You're increasing the sustainability of jobs on the cotton side, and you're also adding jobs on the manufacturing and processing side. There is a real opportunity in this region for a textile sector to develop and thrive. I think part of it is export agreements with the US and the EU. Those may be temporary over the next several years, but there's also just a proximity to market where we can ship to the EU in 15 days. It's more than twice that, shipping from East Africa or Asia in particular, and the US in similar amounts of time if you have enough volume going. There's a low cost of living, and many factors that actually make this a very productive place to manufacture, where it can be competitive in the long run.
What I'd like to see coming out of this conference, and the best case scenario for me, would be to develop a ring spun plant that was in Burkina Faso. So if we could bring farmer education and exchange programs together to share best practices, the Benin farmers might be able to show the Burkina farmers how they develop that biofertilizers. And I mean, they're intercropping now, they're perimeter planting now, they're figuring out ways to use other crops to lure their pest away. I saw some okra in the field that was like this big, and there's a boll weevil and he's going to eat all the okra, and once he's finished digesting that, then he won't need the cotton anymore because the cotton will be flowering. I mean, it'll be bolls by then. And that's their theory, and it's working. The petrochemical companies are creating cancer-causing chemicals that are going to kill our civilization, in my opinion. And so I think what's important to realize is that small-scale farmers have a lot of answers, and they have to work with nature, right? They have no choice. And so for them to adapt to climate change, or for them to adapt to, insect damage, they know how to do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have to start farmer exchange programs. We have to start sharing best practices. We have to get into the fields and really see what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think in many ways the smallholder model also is more efficient than the large-scale model. If it's more efficient in terms of utilization of the land, and I think in the same way organic can be more efficient as well, and in fact create value for farmers if you're able to link it to the end markets, and if you're able to find customers who are willing to pay more for organic, which I think there are. They just haven't quite been linked together yet.
Sometimes I wish we'd stop saying if people are willing to pay more for organic. I don't think people have to pay more for organic. I think people have to pay more for quality. And so if they want quality in their lives, whether it's in the food that they eat or the clothes that they wear or anything else, they have to pay for that quality. They have to pay the true price of the production costs.
I've spoken to multiple farmers in Benin, for example, or heads of farmer organizations that say, we do a great job producing organic, but half of it gets sold into conventional cotton chains, and that's erosive of value, at least to the farmers.
And that's because of post-farm gate supply chain infrastructure not being there.
The Coalition on Organic Fair Trade Cotton is not just doing a great job of producing the cotton, but also linking it to end markets so that they're getting the full value out of that production.